Hi everybody, Amber here for Peoria Public Library today, back with another quick craft to learn and to make some lovely things for this time of year or any time of year if you want to hone some crafty skills and learn a new thing to do while we're still dealing with this pandemic. So what I would like to show you today is how to do some basic embroidery. You're going to need a few items. One that I'm going to be working with is I'm actually going to be embroidering today on a basic flour sack towel. You can buy these in most stores in the kitchen area, usually several to a pack. They aren't that expensive and they're nice to sew against, and you can make some lovely designs on them and give them away as gifts or have personalized tea towels in your home. You will need an embroidery hoop. I'm using one I've had for several years, so I don't even remember the brand anymore. This is a basic 5-inch hoop. You want to use your hoop kind of based on the size of your pattern or what your hands can hold. Because I'm not using a very large pattern, I wanted to use my 5-inch hoop, but I do have, I'm looking at my hoops on the opposite wall, I do have several different sizes depending on what size pattern I'm doing. If you're doing a pattern that's bigger and you only have small hoops, you can certainly move your fabric around and use just a section at a time. I know several people who prefer the smaller hoops because it's easier on their hands than trying to hold a big hoop. So what we're going to use today for a design is I'm using a product called Sticky Fabri-Solvi by Sulky. This is one of my favorite things to do when I'm going to do any kind of embroidery. It is a self-adhesive fabric stabilizer that you can actually run through your printer, or you can design on yourself. For example, I designed this one. See if you can see it. Some holly berries and leaves. I just found a picture that I liked on the internet and traced it using a fabric pencil, and I have this all ready and cut to go on my fabric. The other things you will need are your thread. I'm using a couple of brands of floss, is what it's called. I have some DMC and I have another brand called Designs for the Needle, I guess. They're both 6-strand floss. They feel about the same. You can usually get these at like Joann or Michael's, one of those places. In a vast variety of colors. I want to say they have like 100 shades of blue. I mean, they've got just a wide variety for you to choose from. Make sure you have some thread snips. These are the same scissors that I tried to cut fabric with. Not a good idea, but they're excellent for thread snipping. And you're going to need some needles. If your eyesight isn't that great, you may want to also have a needle threader to help you thread your needles, because the eyes can be pretty small, but at the same time, use what you need to get your needle threaded. So what we want to do is you want to take and separate your hoop and take the inside hoop, put it underneath your fabric where you're going to put the design. I'm going to put this into a corner, so I want to have enough hanging over the edges so that I'm able to put my outside hoop over it. Screw this a little bit, give them a little more room. Alright, so you want to put the outside hoop over the inside hoop, and then a lot of them will have this screw where you can tighten the outside hoop so that it keeps your fabric held taut, so that you don't really mess up your design. You don't want to do it too tight, especially if you have wooden hoops, because it will cause the wood to crack, and you don't want to stretch your fabric too much either. So here I have my fabric is all taut, and then I have my design. And the great thing about Sulky is it's a peelable, so you just find one corner, you peel it off like that, and you stick it onto your fabric. Mine goes a little over the edge, but it's not going to be too much of a problem. If it bothers you, you can actually trim it away from the edges of your hoop. It's not going to bother me though. So I've got my design on there, and this will stay on here until I'm done. Now, once I'm done, you know, obviously you don't want the solvay still on there once you're done, but it washes off. Isn't that so cool? I mean, you don't have to worry about what kind of pencil you use to design on there, and you don't have to worry about it sticking. I'll show you some examples of some other things that I've done. So when you are ready to actually stitch, I like to take my floss, and I take about 4 lengths of this. If you have it wound up, I have a fabulous friend who actually wound a bunch of my floss at one time, and then somebody gave me these, so they haven't been wound by her yet. So all mine is wound. I like to take usually about the length of my arm, because when you're sewing, you don't want to have to pull and pull and pull. Also, it does cause some wear and tear on the thread when you do a lot of it, so you want to keep the thread healthy. So just use a small length of it. I also like to take this is a 6-strand, and most of them are 6-strand. So what you want to do is divide it down, unless you're using a really chunky look. I'm not a real big fan of that with the thread. I like to use 2 strands of the 6, so I usually split it up, and then I will take the 4 leftover strands and I will divide them up and roll them over my fingers, and usually put them with my supplies so that I have the next color ready to go. So it's like having 3 ready to go at once. So you're going to want to thread the needle, which I have done here, and you're going to want to create a knot in the bottom. One of my favorite techniques, well, the technique I learned as a kid was to wrap it around your finger and roll it off, which it does work. The newer one that I've learned over the last few years is you take your needle and you put it against your finger, and you put the thread just behind the needle, like so, and then you want to wind it around 2, 3, even 4 times if you want, so that you have it wound there. Then pinch it with your other hand and push the needle between your finger and your thumb, pulling it down through to the end, and there you have a nice neat knot. And it works very well. It's not a very thick knot, so it hides to the back very well. And then if I'm using multiple colors, I like to thread a needle for each color, and I usually stick them somewhere nearby, like usually in my shirt, which means I stab myself a lot, but you know, it's all for a good cause. So we have our hoop ready, we have our thread ready, and what I want to show you today is a basic back stitch. In order to do that, I'm going to have to switch cameras, so give me a moment to do that, and then we will show you how we do some stitching, okay? Okay, so to do a basic back stitch, which is what I plan to do for this whole design, is I am starting with my needle to the underside. As you can see, I've poked it through between 2 points in the berries here, and I am going to do the first stitch, which is kind of counterintuitive because I am going forward instead of back stitching, but I need a place to start. So I'm going to take a small stitch just like that, and then I'm going to come up past that stitch, just a little bit past, especially since we're working on a curve here. I want to keep my stitches small so that I can keep the curve. And so I pulled up again, but now I'm going to go down through that previous stitch so it'll look like one continuous line when I'm done. I'm just going to continue to do that. You see, I'm poking up, making sure that my needle is coming through the right spot, and just go back down into the previous stitch. And I'm going to keep going all the way around until I reach either the end of my thread or the end point of one of the berries. I'm going to make sure that I'm keeping my stitches small. Sometimes that's the hardest part about this, is keeping your stitches small so that, like I said, you can maintain the curve, especially going when you're fairly new to this. Trying to get shapes can be a little hard, especially if you try to do too big of stitches. When they're straighter lines, it's not as big a deal if you do bigger stitches. That's something that comes with time and talent. I'm trying to come up, what I'd like to do right now is come up right where I'd finished off with the green before. There we go. And we will just continue around like so, no pun intended, until we get to the end of the berry. Alright, once you've finished with a color, or you've come close to the end of a thread that you're working on, you don't want to be working when you've only got about this much thread. You don't have enough room with the needle and thread to move, so you want to make sure that you leave enough. It seems a bit like a waste of thread, but that's the way it goes, and that's why we're glad that it's an inexpensive product. So when you get to the end and you want to finish off and make sure that you don't lose your stitches, it's really an easy thing. You want to just go under a few threads with your needle and start to pull, but you don't want to go all the way. You want to catch into the loop here that's left over and then pull it tight, and do this a couple of times, and this will create a knot in your thread so that you don't have to worry about your stitches coming loose. You do want to make sure that you're only going under the thread and not through the actual fabric, so that your stitches don't show on the other side when the sulky comes off. Okay, when you've done that a couple of times, take your thread snips and snip it close, and you're done. Couple of other tricks that I've learned over the years from doing this. One thing that will happen, I don't say if it happens because it will, when you get to a point where you're pulling your thread and you notice something's kind of pulling funny, you may look to the back side and find that you have a knot in your thread. What you want to do if that's the case, let me see if I can make a knot right quick. Maybe. What you want to do if that happens is you want to just stick your needle into the knot and wiggle it around very gently, and eventually the knot will come loose. So those are just a couple of tips I have. Now let's go back to the real video. Okay, so once you're done with your design, and once you've sewn all your pieces like I've done here, all you have to do is pop it out, unscrew the top part, pull this out, and then go and rinse it with some cold water, and this sulky will dissolve right off, leaving your lovely design and a great tea towel to use. If you want to see what something like this looks like when you're done, I've been working on using sulky for a number of years. I've been working on a quilt that I, of course, have not finished, but once you rinse it off, it looks like that. You can't see, I mean, you can see my threads through the back, but once it's quilted, it won't show. This is for a labyrinth theme quilt that I have been working on for a number of years. But as you can see, the sulky rinses right off, leaves no residue, leaves no trace, and it's a great design. If you have any questions about doing this, feel free to comment and leave them. I'll do my best to answer them. And if you want to learn more about stitching, because this is just one of many stitches you can learn in embroidery, there's a ton of others that can add to your designs. We have lots of books in the library on embroidery, so give us a call and we'll see if we can bring them out to you curbside. Until then, and until we can see you in the library safely, have a good day. Bye.